Hello, let's talk about what happens when a country like Kenya defaults on its national debt, right? Because as of now, Kenya has about 11 trillion Kenya shillings in total when it comes to debt. And with the country generating about 2.4 trillion shillings in revenue, you find that the budget is a bit stressed. The country is a bit stressed, okay? So, what happens if a country like Kenya, which is in debt distress, defaults on its national debt? We'll talk about the effects on the economy, the effects on the investor, the effects on you who has deposited money in the banks. Will you lose your money? What happens? What happens to your investments? Those who've invested in money market funds and treasury bonds and treasury bills, what happens? We'll also talk about the impacts on the future borrowing potential of the country and also the effects on delivery of services, right? So let's start with one, the effects on you who has stored money in the banks, right? Are you going to lose your money? Because if you deposit money in the banks, the money doesn't stay there. It's just the numbers. It's just the screens. The what you see in the screens is what remains there. Actually, very little of the money remains in the banks. Majority of it is invested somewhere, right? And in most cases, you find that local banks tend to buy government bonds, right? Because they tend to be the safest in investments compared to the rest, right? Because it's less risk. So if the government now fails to pay the banks the money they had lended them, which is your money that you had initially deposited, then what do you think? Do you think that the bank could maybe fail to allow you to withdraw your money, right? I think in some countries, like I think Sri Lanka, the citizens of that country were only allowed to access a certain percentage of their money because now majority of the money had been invested somewhere and now the banks could not refund, right? So take a scenario where a lot of people have put their money in the banks and the banks have invested majority of those funds in the government bonds, and then now the government fails to pay the banks. That means that the banks will not have money to refund, and so it could reduce the. You'll find that maybe your bank will tell you that maybe you can only withdraw about 30% of your money, and if you deposit like 100,000, that means that you could only take out like 30,000 Kenyan shillings, right? I think that's how it's going to impact you. And also, let's look about the effects on the economy, right? Now, if there is defaults by the government on its debt, there could be currency devaluation. You remember in 2023 and early 2024, the Kenya shillings depreciated to the dollar. In fact, the shilling went to up to 160, equivalent to $1, right? So if there is that currency devaluation, that means that foreign currencies becomes expensive, and that means that importation of goods from outside the country becomes a bit expensive. And for a country like Kenya and many other African countries, when it comes to importing of goods and things like oil, for example, which most African countries do, by the way, is that the prices of oil will skyrocket in that process. And as a result of that, that means everything, because now if oil affects prices of literally everything, including transportation, that means majority of the things could rise in terms of prices. And we know what happens when that happens. You will find that the citizens feel the pain, the pain of having to pay a lot, and as a result of that, they could start to riot and protest, right? So I think 2023, 2024, actually 2024 finance bill in Kenya, there was a lot of demonstrations of people rejecting the finance bill because now there was a lot of punitive taxes, right, on the citizens, and people are saying no to more taxes, right? And this could have been caused by austerity measures that were taken by the government as a result of meeting the expectations of the debtors and also to get more loans to also finance the previous loans, right? So those are just the effects on the economy. And also, what happens to the future borrowing of the country? A country which has defaulted, what happens to them? Do you think they're still going to be given loans that easily by the loaners? Of course not, because now those who are loaning them will have less confidence now in their debt repayment, right? Because if they have defaulted, what is to say that they are not going to default again, right? Now that becomes a risk government, right? And now if it were me, I'm going to loan them, then of course I'm not going to give my money to them because now the risk is high because they are unpredictable, right? So that's how it just affects future borrowing, right? And global lenders like IMF, World Bank, and Eurobond buyers, like the local and also those who are abroad, could be a bit hesitant when it comes to lending the government money, right? So that could be a challenge. And also, what happens to those who are investing in money market funds? Because money market funds, literally, some percentage of it, although someone said that it's a bit safer, but some percentage of it definitely is invested in government bonds and treasury bills, right? So you find that the same effects could happen to them like those who have only deposited with the banks, right? Because now it's the same banks. Nobody stores in cash in the mattress, right? Unless of course you're living under a rock. But if you're lending to if you're depositing in the banks, there is high chance that the banks are lending the government those money and affected the same way as those who are depositing, right? So what is the solution to this? Is it that governments should stop borrowing at all, or what should they do? Huh? Because debt, of course, isn't bad, but especially if it's used wisely, right? So I think the solution is just one: government should borrow and borrow wisely, right? They need to make sure that debt is manageable in the long run. Recently, I had uh, the CS Treasury body talking about the way they've managed the country's debt. I think they were saying that they distributed to about to around 2032, yeah, to 2032. So you find that there is no that close repayment, quick repayment of the debt, which could stress the country. But I guess we'll have to just wait and see on that. So the effects are many. Probably the government should be cautious and also eradicate corruption because now, if people are seeing that they are paying taxes, for example, uh, talk about a lot of people are paying taxes, right? Citizens are paying taxes, but again, they don't see where those taxes go because they don't see the development. Even though the Kenyan constitution states that for each borrowing, there should be a project that's linked to that particular loan. But again, the citizen in the ground cannot see the projects being built, but they see debt rising. So I think the government should just they need to be responsible in terms of debt borrowing, just not to hurt the economy, right? Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think? What could happen? What do you think, in your own opinion, could happen if governments default? Leave a comment in the comment section, and of course, don't forget to share and probably definitely like and subscribe to this channel for future videos. See you in the next one.